Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Welcome to another episode of Extrology. I'm your host, Lee, and today we have an extraordinary guest who is redefining the boundaries of fitness and gaming. In this episode, we dive into the world of virtual fitness with Cameron Brookhouse, the co-founder and CEO of Quell. Cameron leads the charge at Quell, a trailblazing company that has developed the Impact, the first ever dedicated fitness gaming platform, and its accompanying action RPG, Shardfall. Imagine a workout that's not just effective, burning up to 900 calories an hour, but also thrillingly immersive. That's what Quell offers. But who is Cameron Brookhouse? Before the advent of Quell, Cameron was a luminary in the fields of management consulting and education to employment systems. His journey from an associate at McKinsey & Co. to establishing the UK arm of a not-for-profit organisation, Generation, showcases his deep expertise in transforming ideas into impactful realities. Today, we'll uncover the story behind Quell, a company at the vanguard of a virtual fitness industry valued at over $16 billion. With over 10,000 pre-orders of its groundbreaking Impact device and a recent $10 million Series A funding, Quell is a testament to Cameron's vision and leadership. Cameron's here to share insights on the fusion of gaming mechanics with fitness products, enhancing not just physical well-being, but also making fitness a fun, integral part of our daily lives. Given the UK's passion for gaming and our quest for innovative fitness solutions, Cameron's insights are more relevant than ever. So buckle up as we explore how Quell is making fitness engaging and accessible, and how Cameron's journey can inspire us to think differently about technology, entrepreneurship, and our own fitness journeys. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Cam Brookhouse, welcome to Extrology. Great to have you here as my guest today. As is often customary for Extrology, we like to start with a bit of context and background. So I'm interested to understand how perhaps your early life and also your academic background, particularly your time at Oxford, shape your approach to technology and innovation.
Oh, okay, big question. Yeah, so a little bit about my background. I grew up moving around a lot. So I was born in Edinburgh, and then it was England, Hong Kong, Australia, Hong Kong, back to England again, which was super, super cool. And I, got exposure to a lot of different cultures and got pretty good, I think, at making friends quickly and being excited about new experiences. But it was also a little bit tough at the same time because, you kind of have to scorch earth everything every time you leave a place and then build it up from scratch again. So I've come to very much value, stability and like long-term friendships and a sense of home. So no desire to leave the UK in the near term. All my friends are hitting that age now where they're kind of, jet setting off to different countries, and I'm very happy right here. But yeah, I think growing up, I was not a techie, sciencey guy at all. I was very much an artsy kid. I did a ton of drama. I was a saxophonist. And then I kind of started getting very interested in English literature and then kind of philosophy, politics, economics, that real sort of essay kid direction. And that was what I was going to do at university right up until my final year of exams. And then two things happened. I had this incredible chemistry teacher, Mr. Lau, who just had the most passion for the subject you can imagine, really brought it to life. And I started becoming really excited about science for the first time. Amazing what a good teacher can do. And then Iron Man came out, and Robert Downey Jr., in that film, was like, yeah, that's what I want. I want to be an inventor. I want to be someone who creates. And so I changed all of my courses. I dropped English and economics and everything. And I took physics, chemistry, maths all in the last year of school, just did a wholesale pivot, which was very stressful. And then started looking at what was interesting in the kind of scientific realm. And I discovered this thing called material science. I actually found it on the Oxford website. I'd never heard of it before, but it's essentially the science of matter. So how can you create new materials with different properties? And I kind of fell in love with the idea of that because it's really the first stage of innovation, if you like. You can design products and you can design new technologies, but ultimately new materials is what unlocks all of that, right? Like without the semiconductor, there's no computer or lasers. And so I found that really interesting. And I also like that it was a blend of everything, a bit of chemistry, a bit of physics, quantum mechanics, maths. And I was very anti-specializing and still am today. So I went to Oxford and I did that course. And I have to say, I hated it.
Did you?
I had it completely wrong. Yeah. It was awful. Basically from week one, it was like, I've made a huge mistake. I'm not interested in this at all. But, I got into a good university and I felt like that, you don't necessarily get that chance twice. So I had to stick it out. So I did the course and I made some amazing friends, one of whom, Martin, has become a co-founder. So I live with him. And he helped me a lot with the course as well, in terms of finding it interesting and getting the right answers. But I used my time at Oxford to kind of explore a bunch of other stuff because I knew that academic science wasn't really for me. So I did a bunch of sort of consultancy work through the student consultancy. And then, I tried banking. My dad was a banker. And so there was I had to try. Realized I definitely didn't like that. The money is great, but I think the culture is tough. And I just didn't find it interesting or rewarding enough to kind of turn money into more money. And then I tried to validate whether I really didn't want to be a scientist. So I went to MIT for a summer. I got a really cool grant to go and work on optoelectronics out there. So computers that run on light instead of electricity. And I was looking at kind of gallium as a material that could be used for the crystals that kind of replace the wires there. Fascinating problem, but again, just not interesting enough in terms of the culture and not where I wanted to be. I think it's a very slow progression there as well. And then the coolest thing I did is I went out to Cambodia for I think 4 months, again on a different grant. And there was this really interesting problem that this kind of NGO was trying to solve, where they built these incredibly affordable toilets, these kind of concrete modular toilets. And the goal was to reduce the practice of open defecation in Cambodia. So people, do their business on the floor and flies land on it and it gets on other things. And it's a really big driver of infant mortality. And so the idea was make it cheap, make it something that you can deliver very easily to faraway places. And they saw massive adoption, right? So I think they sold like 100,000 units of these toilets. But then no one was building or using them. They just left them lying, outside their houses. And so the problem was like, why is this happening and how can we solve it? Like, this is so weird. They've spent non-trivial money on this and there's intent, but what's happening? And so I went out there as a kind of material specialist, but with a real design bent. So we went out with all these focus groups in different villages and really drove deeper and deeper into the root of the problem. And what everyone was telling us was they couldn't afford a toilet shelter. So the walls and the ceiling that go around the toilet, they couldn't afford that. And so they weren't building their toilets until they'd saved up for the shelter. But the only thing they would buy was like a $200 brick and mortar shelter, which made no sense, right? There's tons of cheaper alternatives. And it turned out through a lot of research that the problem was that in Cambodia, the toilet shelter outside your house is like the car in your driveway in the West. It's a status symbol. So no one would buy a cheap toilet shelter. It was embarrassing. It was a shame thing. And so we dived in a bit more. Is it that you actually want a really expensive toilet shelter, or is it that it just needs to look expensive? And it turned out that it was the latter, right? It was purely like a social thing, not a quality thing. And so what we wound up designing was this shelter that was, that was excellent, but was nowhere near as expensive, but it looked the part. We used this thing called ferroconcrete, which was kind of like chicken wire woven through concrete, which is actually very inexpensive. And that was an amazing solve to this problem that really resonated with those customers and led eventually to wide-scale adoption. And that was my first taste of like product, right? Like design, actually understanding a problem, coming up with a novel solution, and I loved it. So I feel like I'm talking a lot and I'm not really giving you any space to jump in.
I was going to say, so many questions. But why? What was it, to your point of experiencing a problem, solving that problem with a solution that sparked something in you? What was it about that experience, if you like, that you loved?
I loved a lot of things about that experience. I think one was parachuting into a really well-defined problem with a serious social impact. So if you can solve this, you meaningfully affect infant mortality across the whole country. It was fascinating. And then the next thing I loved about it was that it wasn't just a quant problem, right? Like, how do we make it this strong or cost this much? It was a behavioral psychology problem. So there are products that fit this on paper, but no one's buying them. Why? That's fascinating. And then I think from a sort of personal perspective, being able to straddle that divide. So I'm going out there and I'm using the human side of my toolkit to understand what are the issues here? What are the underlying issues? And how do we use that to kind of sophisticate the brief and understand the real problem to be solved? But then also the kind of engineering, product design, like, let's actually make something that addresses these criteria. And we built this like rapid prototyping thing where, we were literally pouring concrete and, we're using treated bamboo and then chicken wire. And we're going out to the market and just buying stuff, mocking up prototypes and driving out to villages and seeing what people thought. And so I think that rapid cadence where you actually put something in front of real customers and say, is this good? Like, are we moving closer to the outcome, was really rewarding.
I'm fascinated to go back just a stage further and reflect on your kind of, I'm guessing it would have been A-level, sixth form type experiences if we position it as such. And this pivot I'm not going to be, well, actually I am going to be so simplistic as to break down the human psyche to left brain, right brain. But most of us, we can make some assumptions here, but most tend to go naturally leaning one way or the other. And to your point, this is really interesting blend of both. And then it would appear, this is clearly me butchering all facets of psychology now, but it would appear that they then come back into, to form in this sense of actually the human element to the problem, the societal impact of solving this problem. There's an emotional intelligence that comes through. There's a sort of collision of problem solving. There's science, there's materials, there's people. So actually each step of the way, you almost go, I've left, now I'm right, now I'm somewhere in the middle, smashing it all together. It sounds like you've got it's a fascinating journey, I'd imagine, to start that discovery through acknowledging what makes you tick.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely learned a lot about myself during that time period and kind of every 2 years since, right? I think probably like most people.
Yeah.
But I think one thing I really learned is that, like, for me, everything is a variety is the spice of life, right? Like everything is boring quickly. And the best way to head that off at the pass is to find yourself or build yourself a job that allows you to flex lots of different muscles at different times. And if you can, give yourself a bit of agency in when to do that. So if you can kind of say, okay, today feels like sit down and do some hardcore Excel modeling and real quant stuff, but tomorrow I want to write a story for the game or, jumping ahead a little bit here. I think that's ideal. And I think that's something that I kept building at university with all these different experiences and that I was really hungry for when I was leaving university.
So I wanted to post-university, why management consulting?
Yeah, I mean, so I think like a lot of people leaving university, I still didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I kind of see consulting as like a finishing school for university where you haven't specialized yet, and you're committing not to specialize yet, but you know that what you want to do is develop a very broad set of commercially viable skills very quickly while you work out what you want to do. And it also gives you a massive opportunity for exposure to lots of different sectors and geographies and kinds of role. So it's almost like a taster course, right? Like every project, I mean, it's like 2 or 3 month projects and every one is something completely different. So that was really cool. And I think I already was starting to feel like eventually I wanted to start a business and do something product oriented. And so I felt that consulting was a really good blooding, right? For that. Like how do you kind of build that multi-purpose toolkit while you work out what's next?
So transitioning from management consulting to co-founding Quell is quite a shift. What motivated the change, that shift in career path? What motivated it?
I mean, a couple of things. I think, so consulting was amazing for a long time for me. I think I got a lot out of it. I grew really quickly. You're 21 and you're being put in front of the CEO of a FTSE 100 company and they're asking you what you think. Like that's nuts. You don't get that in any other job, I don't think, anyway.
No.
So that was super cool. I think a lot of people do consulting because the alternative is something like banking or law, but they kind of want to save the world. It's this weird sort of this thing that attracts those sorts of people. And so I was really interested in social good and social change. I did a bunch of sort of government projects focused on that, and then charity stuff. Did a really cool one in Lebanon, the Palestinian refugee camp, sort of setting up a social enterprise there, sort of an embroidery thing, which was really compelling. But I think I started to feel like, okay, for every one cool project where you're really making a difference on the world, there are 5 where it is, pure commerce, and that was less interesting. I think the pace of growth started to slow down, but you're working like 16, 17 hours a day, every single day. So you're giving your life to this thing, and maybe you're not getting the impact and the growth that you want as you kind of progress through the rungs there. And so I kind of did a bit of an inventory. It was like, okay, where am I? What do I want? And I felt, okay, what I want to do is create something. I wanted to make something that was a product, a consumer-facing product that people wouldn't just solve a pain. They would love it. It would be something that when they spoke about it, it would be exciting as well as useful. Something tangible. Physicality, I think, is a dying art. No one wants to invest in hardware products anymore. And everything is increasingly becoming sort of software as a service. And I love things that are real, that you can touch. And I sort of looked at my skill set and realized, I've got a little bit of the engineering. I've got the business and the consulting side of stuff. What I don't know anything about is design. So instead of doing the classic, I've done 3 years in consulting and now I'm going to do an MBA, I blew everything up in McKinsey terms and kind of went and did a design master's at the Royal College of Art in Imperial, which was very cool. It was this real interdisciplinary sort of business meets design course. It was a 2-year master's, and that's where I met my second co-founder, Lorenzo, who eventually became Quell's CPO. And yeah, while I was there on this course, I became kind of obsessed with what we call the fitness problem, right? From my perspective, fitness is totally broken as a space where everyone knows they should do it. Every doctor would prescribe it if it was a drug, and yet everyone finds it really, really hard to stick to, or lots of people do anyway. A couple of really fun stats that I found. So the first one was this Strava survey. So Strava is a running app. I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be familiar with it. They did a survey of their own customers, right? So this is people who are runners enough that they are using a running app. And one of their questions was about how they felt about running. And they found that 50% of runners hate or barely tolerate running. That's a quote. So you have 50% of the people using a product, if you like, that despise it and are doing it anyway. And then the other one is that 64% of gym memberships are completely unused. So again, more than half of people who are paying a non-trivial expense for the gym aren't going, but are keeping the subscription running because of this vague sense of guilt. And like, maybe one day I'll be the kind of person who actually does this, which is just crazy. Like, what other sector can charge people that kind of money to not use your product?
It's a fabulous business model, but to your point, 64%, that is an alarming statistic.
Right.
And yet so many of us know the value that it attributes us, but yet, to your point, don't fulfill.
Well, absolutely. And so I decided to go really deep on this because it just felt like a really messed up space. And so we interviewed around, 100-ish people who identified as having problems with exercise. And we used that deep structure interview method where it was why, but then why that, but then why that. And you're really probing for kind of the core issues here. And a couple of really interesting insights emerged out of that. The first one is that, okay, so the question around like, well, if everyone hates the gym, why is everyone going, right? Or if everyone hates running, why is everyone doing it? And we realized that there's this category of exercise, which we've started calling default fitness. And default fitness is something that you do because it's low barrier, right? Like, I don't need any special knowledge. It doesn't cost me anything really. I don't need friends who do it. I don't need to organize anything. It's not weather dependent. It's not travel dependent. I can just go out for a run, or I can just pop to the gym. But the flip side is that there's very low what we call motive force. So it's not enjoyable, right? It's easy, but it's not enjoyable. And the second insight was that what we call engaging exercise, right? So it's a fun exercise, basically. The first insight is that everyone can tell you a time they've loved exercise. I don't care how much someone thinks they hate exercise, how much of a couch potato they are. They can tell you a time, often it was at school, right? Or university, where, I used to play like football with my mates and that was really fun, but can't do that anymore. Like that's gone. Life's terrible. And this is what I do now and I'm miserable. So it's not about the individual. It's about the access to exercise and their current relationship with exercise. And then the kind of third insight was that the things that make exercise fun are exactly the same things that make gaming fun. And it took us like 100 interviews to get to this answer. It's so obvious in retrospect, right? What are sports? Sports are games. So yes, of course, the things that make games fun are the same things that make sports fun. So yeah, that whole thing was a bit of a wild goose chase. But when you drill into it, I get rewards quickly. I progress in a meaningful way fast. There's a kind of social element to it often. There's a blend of skill, but also luck in my outcome. So everything isn't predetermined, right? Like that team might just be really good, or the ball might bounce funny. And that keeps things exciting. But then really crucially, people like exercise when it is immersive. And that's a word that gets used a lot today in this kind of like metaverse era. It's a word that's almost lost its meaning, but we mean it in a very specific way, which is in immersive fitness, everything you're doing makes sense logically in service of like a gamified goal. So to go back to the football analogy, like I am sprinting to catch up with you because you have the ball. I am leaping to head it into the goal off of the corner. I am like squatting and sliding to take it off you, right? In a tackle. So everything makes sense from that context. And then also I have choice, right? So no one's telling me what I have to do. I don't have to run. I have a set of options available to me. All of them are great exercise, right? Football is great exercise, but it's up to me which path I take through this kind of exercise routine, if you like. And you contrast that with the gym. Go and lift something heavy 30 times, right? There's no goal that's gamified, and there's no choice there. It is lacking in agency.
So those observations, I guess, is inevitably feeding through to my next question as to specific experiences or observations that led you to conceptualize Quell. But I'm guessing it's what you've just described. So was there a moment when that sort of eureka moment when you realized that there was, if we combine fitness and gaming, hey, that's it. That's the offer.
Yeah. I mean, so I think I'm the target customer for Quell, which always helps. I'm a big gamer. I used to love fitness. I did a ton of stuff. I did gymnastics. I did swimming. I did rugby, all of it at a pretty competitive level. And then life got hard and I stopped, right? And I think we had all these insights about fitness. And the kind of idea was, okay, how can we use gaming, which maps so well to these kind of enjoyment factors? How can we use gaming to reduce all of these barriers and deliver those things in your living room? And so, I mean, we played everything on the market, right? Like absolutely every fitness game that has ever been invented. And most of them just are not, I mean, I don't want to disparage, I won't name any competitors specifically, but most of them are just not fitness games. Like they don't deliver fitness. Like, it's not an actual substitute for the gym or a run. And most of them are like pretty basic games, right? I think a lot of people gamble or well, not gamble because it's true, but they bet on the fact that people want fitness to be fun so badly that they will accept a substandard game. And so really it was like, okay, look, the space is pretty ripe here. If we can deliver something that is incredible gaming, like you would play this game just because it's a great game by itself. And then if you can combine that with exercise that is not a trade-off versus traditional exercise, it's 600 calories an hour, it's like a spin class, then that's not just a gimmick every 2 years, which is what it's been historically. That's a sector. That's a massive, massive sector, and the demand is there. The execution is everything, right? And so, I mean, I think the eureka moment was from both men and women, we found that combat was a very aspirational sport, right? Everyone wishes they were a badass. Everyone wishes they were a fighter, but it's also really hard to access, right? Like you got to walk into a boxing gym. That's pretty tough. That's pretty scary. You can injure yourself pretty easily. There's a lot of things that kind of get in the way of that. So we had the idea for this. I mean, the original idea was terrible, by the way. The original idea was like a boxing bag with a slot where you put your phone in to this slot, and it became the face of the enemy, right? And you kind of like punched the bag, and it did all this stuff with sensors, and it was very expensive and very ugly and not a good product. But from that, we realized that people really loved that kind of cathartic feeling of resistance, of hitting something, right? Rather than shadow boxing or VR stuff, there was real value in resistance. So, okay, how do we wearabilize the punching bag, and how do we turn this into a more compelling gaming experience? And then COVID hit, like as we were going through this process, which was great and terrible at the same time. It was terrible because it meant that you couldn't buy anything for love nor money on Amazon, and we were trying to prototype. But it was great because everyone started getting really into the idea of home fitness. So we bought what we could on Amazon, and we cobbled together this hacky prototypes. I taught myself game design a little bit. So I built this little prototype of the game. And then we got like an Arduino, a kind of programmable microcontroller. We taped 2 massive microcontrollers to our fists. We got like a bungee jumping cord and like tied that onto an MMA glove and then tied that to a climbing harness. And we just built the hackiest prototype of what eventually became Quell. And it was one of those things where the second you had it, the game was like this little robot who didn't really do anything except when you hit him, he kind of went like, oh. But even that bare bones experience was just like awesome. Just you immediately clicked that there was something really special here. And I think that's when we realized, okay, let's lean into this.
So what's the journey from the prototype to which you refer into a reality?
I mean, that's a very long story. I'll give you the potted history bit of it, and we can dive in wherever's interesting for you. But the short version is, I think originally we were thinking this would take a very long time to get interest, right? Like it's a complex product. We're talking about serious hardware. I'm talking about building a console, basically, with a bunch of fitness stuff on top of it, and then some crazy machine learning that no one had ever done before, and then games, right? Like you build a game studio. So all of this felt like a very distant possibility. And so I think the idea initially was let's kind of work on this in our free time and see if we can turn it into something. But more as a kind of forcing mechanism for us to make sure that there was a commercial opportunity here, we kind of pulled together a business plan and we applied to this sort of startup accelerator in the US called Y Combinator, which is amazing. And I think the average number of applications to get in is 3. They have a ton of amazing companies there who are already generating revenue. We were 3 guys with like a render and the beginnings of a business plan, but we applied anyway.
Out of interest, what was it that made you pick them? Because to your point, that's a hugely competitive space, right? And so the all cliches apply, but you're clearly not just simply shooting for the moon here. You're going full on stars, anything that gets in the way.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to answer that without being flippant, but I think why would you apply to anything but the best thing, right? And I think for us it was, okay, if we get into this, fantastic. There's definitely value here. There's amazing people at Y Combinator, and they've put out astonishing companies, Reddit and Airbnb and Dropbox. That's clear value. I think, there's a lot of good incubators out there as well, but there's a lot of bad ones. And I think, it was so early days. We were just like, okay, let's apply to the best thing and see what happens. And it did pan out. So that was very exciting.
What were some of the key milestones and challenges that you faced?
Before or after Y Combinator? Or during?
During.
A lot. So we arrived there. So YC gives you, some money in exchange for an equity stake. So we had a little bit of cash now to start doing real stuff. But their whole philosophy is launch now, which makes a lot of sense if you're building a SaaS product, because you can build the MVP and just launch it. For us, it was like, what? Like how? What are you talking about? That's impossible, right? This is going to be 3 years of development. And so, but that was the message. Like, figure it out, right? Launch now. And we had some amazing advisors at YC who helped us figure out how to do it. But essentially, we knocked together something that kind of looked the part and worked enough, right? Just to demonstrate the concept and invested in a bit of polish to make it look more exciting rather than just functional. And our first test was we put up this product on our own website, which had no social proof, no credibility. I don't think there was even a ship date at first. And then just pure organic. We didn't spend any marketing money, but we just, tried to get the message out there a little bit. And we took, I think, around $10,000 of revenue in the first week of this website being live, which doesn't sound like much in the grand scheme of things, but
I think it does. From a standing start with literally no marketing spend and a message of launch now, that's no mean feat.
I think, we felt the same way, definitely. And so that was the first really big proof point for us. Like, okay, we're onto something here. Let's go.
I was going to say that you must have, not to make any assumptions, but that would give you some confidence at the very least that, to your point, you're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. It really did. And then it became, okay, basically, how do we scale this up, right? How do we create even bigger validation for this? And so the obvious next answer was Kickstarter. So we went and talked to, 10, 15 people who had run really successful Kickstarters, who were really generous with their time. And we hacked this together, right? We had a product and it worked, and we knew that was great, but we didn't have an office, we didn't have a team, we didn't have anything. So we were running around like headless chickens trying to create this really compelling sort of visual proposition for customers, right? So, I mean, our launch video, we literally like rented an office space for the day, got all of our home furniture in there and just tried to make it feel like something, impressive. Just hack the whole thing together and really focused on what is the customer value here? What do they want to hear? Talking to people who had already bought. You tell me why you've bought this product, and then playing those words back to customers. And then we launched it and put some marketing spend behind it for the first time. And I forget the exact numbers now, but I think it was close to $500,000 between both Kickstarter and Indiegogo in that kind of Y Combinator period, which was just nuts. I mean, I think it was $100,000 on day one, and we would have been ecstatic to get that over the course of the whole campaign. And so, sitting in my living room with the sewing machine and the 3D printer that we bought to make this prototype, and just watching the orders come in was an incredible moment. I think that's when we really felt like, okay, we've tipped. This is going to get investment. People want to buy this. We can make this thing. That one day told us, you can make this now, which is thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. Yeah, a very exciting period.
I think, I suspect I might know the answer, but given the success of that experience, and an awful lot of blood, sweat and tears, I accept, will have gone into getting you there, but is there anything that you might have done differently, do you think, with the benefit of hindsight?
I think it's a really tough one. So the obvious one that springs to mind is, when we first did this, we thought everything was going to be much easier than it was, right? In developing this product. I don't think I don't think anyone could have grasped how incredibly complex it was going to be, not just to build the product, but to build the company and get the investment and do all of these things in parallel. And so I think the ship date that we committed to in the beginning was wildly optimistic. And, you don't know what you don't know. But I think that's been something that's been really tough for the whole team since then, because ultimately we want to create something that customers are going to love. We don't want to ship something early or half finished and have them, trying to see eventually what this might become. We want to give them something great day one. But it's really tough for the whole team when we have to do delays, and no one likes sort of telling customers that that's what's happening. So that's always a shame. But I think in terms of would we do it differently, I think part of probably why those pre-orders happened at such scale was to do with the timelines that we thought were achievable in the beginning. I think that part of the reason the investment was secured was based on those timelines. And so, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. Like if we didn't think that we could do it that quickly, would we have got the sales and would we have got the investment and would we have been able to do it at all? So I think that's a tough one. But I think taking all of the constraints out of the situation, I would not have put a ship date on this product.
So for the benefit of listeners, describe Quell for us.
Yeah, so Quell ultimately is, well, I'll start with the mission. So the mission is to make fitness something that people can fall in love with, right? So to turn it from a workout into play, whilst retaining that kind of incredible exercise efficacy that you would get from traditional exercise. So no compromises. The strap line was real gaming, real fitness, zero compromise. That's kind of at the heart of the product. And what that looks like in practice is the world's first gaming platform that is 100% built for fitness from the ground up. Other platforms have done fitness games. When we looked at all of this space, we realized that we need to create something brand new here to deliver what we think customers will really fall in love with. And so the parts of the product are the Quell Impact, which is this sort of wearable games platform, which is tracking all of the motions that you're performing through these sensors in the head and the hands, and then using incredibly cutting edge AI to in real time work out what you've done. So you've done a jab, you've done a hook, you've done a cross or an uppercut. It was this fast, it was this strong, your technique looked like this. We can track jumping and running and ducking and all these other metrics that come out of that and do that in real time without any kind of VR headset or any sort of complexity in the system. You just wear this thing and it does it for you. It also has sort of customizable resistance bands that are applying a load to your motions, which has two benefits. One, it makes the exercise much better and includes some strength training as well as cardio, which sort of VR doesn't do right now. And two, it enhances that feeling of immersion, right? Like you feel like you're hitting something instead of nothing. Well, and I guess three actually, is injury prevention. So if you're shadowboxing and you're really going ham, you can lock your elbow and that causes a lot of pain. We've put a lot of thought into how to, remove the possibility of injury. Another classic boxing injury is that you punch a bag or a person and you roll your wrist. That's really, really common.
Yeah.
So we anchor all of the load below the wrist. So there is no way to do that with the Quell Impact. So yeah, sorry, I kind of went on a bit of a tangent there. But so you've got this kind of wearable platform. It's also reading your heart rate, providing haptics. It has game controls, everything that you could want it to do across myriad games. Then you have the games themselves. So our launch game is called Shardfall. It is this amazing sort of fantasy, action role-playing game where you are running and fighting your way through this beautiful, brand new world, and everything is focused on, high intensity, high octane immersion, keeping you involved in that experience so that you forget that you're working out and just fall in love with it. And everything is reactive, right? So the game will never tell you, like a lot of fitness games do squats now, right? To do damage. Instead, a giant monster is swinging a tree at your face, and you are naturally and instinctively ducking to avoid being hit in the face with a tree, which is bad in most people's opinion. So that's sort of game one, and it's kind of this roguelike structure where the second to second gameplay is really fun and immersive, and something that you want to keep coming back to. But you're also upgrading over time. So every session you're getting a little bit stronger in the game world. You're getting that immediate reward, that immediate sense of progression, instead of the very deferred rewards of traditional exercise, which keeps you excited and invested in coming back. And then long term, this is a platform. We want to be the defining platform of the fitness gaming space. And so we'll be making additional games. I'm not going to announce them now. I'm not going to tell you what they are now. Sure. I'm definitely not going to put a ship bid on them. But yeah, expanding this to a huge portfolio of fitness games with different genres and themes and fitness focuses is the ultimate aspiration for the product. And then for each of those games, continuing to give them a lot of love and support, new content, things that make it feel fresh, and again, make you keep coming back over time. Ultimately, fitness is about commitment over time, and any product that is a one-shot thing where you play through a single piece of content and then it's done can't be a kind of partner for you or a coach for you on a fitness journey, because it ends.
One of the things that really fascinates me as you talk is it strikes me the word play is one that springs to mind. So I'm thinking that to your point as to your football analogy earlier. So at no point, and I love football, sadly I'm at an age where I have to acknowledge that the prospect of me enjoying an esteemed Premier League career is probably slightly behind me, but nonetheless, I finally got to that realisation. But the thing that when I played football, I did that. I played football. At no point did I ever think, I'm consciously at least, I'm exercising today. I'm getting my fitness in today. I was playing a game.
Yeah.
Right. Clearly, there were benefits to it from a health perspective, and endorphins were, but all of those sort of things that you would associate. But I wasn't ever consciously thinking, I'm keeping myself fit. I was just playing a game.
Right.
And I think whatever game you want to do, hockey, netball, tennis, you pick a game. They're just games, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in this concept of play. And that as kids, we just do it in varying degrees, some more so than others, but most kids, we play. And then at some point, something happens and we don't play anymore. We become adults, and to your point, life gets in the way and we get busy and we do stuff, and play becomes something for kids. And then you start to think, probably should look after myself a little bit better, so I need to go to a gym. Play is a really important thing, and we sort of lose sight of it a bit. But I think where maybe, and I'm interested in your perspective on this, Cam, that gaming might be perceived or might run the risk of having almost a sort of, I don't want to say anti-fitness message, but this sense that gaming is something you do for 12 hours in the dark, through the night, sitting on your backside, killing zombies with your pals. So it's great fun, but there aren't any there's a lot of mental stimulation for sure, but physical benefits it comes, as an industry, it comes in for some criticism because it doesn't afford us getting off our backsides and moving. So obviously you're coming back to what Quell is absolutely fighting against that. But is that a big battle for you to fight, that you get over this sense of, yes, we're gaming, but actually what we're doing is you're getting the benefits of play and fitness with this sort of gamification element, combining the two? Do you find yourself sort of, I'll get to a question in a minute, I'm thinking it through, but is that a barrier for you, this sense of, well, gaming is something you do at 3 a.m, killing zombies on your backside, you're not moving around? Is that a challenge for you to overcome?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think the short answer is it's kind of the opposite for us, right? Like it's something that is a massive incentive for almost all types of people, right? Like if you're a hardcore gamer and you're not feeling great about your exercise routine or your health, like this is kind of gaming without the guilt, right? Like you can enjoy an amazing experience, but just enjoy it. I think for fitness people who aren't massive gamers, it is, a way of finding fitness entertaining, but, bringing, some depth of sort of, entertainment experience into that kind of, into that environment. I don't think that was incredibly unclear, but essentially what a lot of people do with fitness is they distract themselves. So they'll be listening to a podcast, or they'll, listen to some music, or maybe they'll even watch a movie on the treadmill at the gym, or they try and gamify it around the edges of it without necessarily realizing that's what they're doing. Like, okay, I'm going to set myself this target, and if I beat it, I'm going to feel good. Or I'm going to track all my stats and, do the quantified self thing. Or, even I've got little badges on my Nike, Run Club app. All of these things are kind of a light form of gamification. And I think even for people who aren't massive gamers, stopping gamification being a layer that sits outside of exercise and a distraction and turning it into something that is core to the experience is super compelling. I also think like that, go back 30 years, there was this real binary distinction, right, between gamers and cool, fit, exercising people. Like, I think that's been completely eroded.
Yeah, and that's partly, possibly from my perspective, an element of unconscious bias that's drawing that kind of I'm making that distinction between the two, which so what we're really seeing is a merging of play and health, fitness, all becoming an all-consuming proposition, which sounds really exciting. Sounds like a lot, and frankly, sounds like I have a lot of fun. That's the bit that really appeals to me. It's the fun you can have. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have a lot of fun along the way, and I'm going to feel better about myself, and I'm actually getting some physical, genuine health benefit from participating. How do you believe that the incorporation of gaming mechanics into fitness products will transform the way people approach their fitness routines?
Yeah, I think, again, that's a big question. And I think the answer is in lots of different ways. So I think games have got really, really good at incentivizing a desired behavior. Like the behavioral psychology and research that goes into modern gaming is phenomenal. Unfortunately, at the moment, it is mainly used to extract as much money as possible from people and keep them playing in those spaces for as long as possible. It's actually one of the questions that we thought was really fun at the beginning of Quell was, can we just use all of the evil stuff, all of the evil behavioral psychology that sort of freemium games use to maximize cash per user, but use it to kind of maximize calories, right? Like, can we hack your brain and allow you to almost like buy the motivation you wish you had? And so, I think the things that gaming can give you in terms of what it can do to your fitness routine is one, that kind of motivation, right? So I'm getting these kind of varied random rewards really quickly. I'm leveling up. Even if I'm not feeling stronger or fitter or slimmer yet in real life, I'm getting better in the game quickly. And that's making me feel invested. And it's going to be new every time. I'm not going back to the same gym to do the same thing with the most minute variation on my routine. I'm going to be in a different world doing a whole new thing. And that's super, super exciting. I think the other big thing that it gives you is the ability to tailor a workout live, dynamically to a person. So in Shardfall, we're kind of continuously tracking how well the user is performing against the content they're currently facing. How tired are they? What's their heart rate? How much difficulty are they having with this? And on the back end, we are changing what they're going to see next to deliver a workout that is at the right level for them. And we know what shape we want, right? Like it's high intensity interval training, so it's peaks and troughs. And you can move someone through those peaks and troughs by giving them different kinds of experiences. So, suddenly an enemy appears that is a ticking time bomb, right? And you just have to do as much damage to it as you can, as quickly as possible, or it's going to blow up in your face, literally blow up in your face. Okay, like you are now going to go absolutely nuts, even if you didn't think you had it in the tank before, and your heart rate's going to spike and you're going to start burning calories. But then, okay, they've been there long enough, let's put them into an experience where it's a gentle jog through a forest and they're really focused on avoiding obstacles and picking up, rewards, and you drop back down again. So I think that's something that you need to pay a trainer for in real life, right? That kind of personalized, tailored approach. And gamers can deliver that for you in a way that is seamless and fun.
Interesting. So what advice might you give aspiring entrepreneurs out there who perhaps want to blend different fields, like, for example, the technology in the way that you have with technology and fitness? Based on your experience, what advice might you give them?
So I think that starting pragmatic for a second, because I think there's a lot of advice out there that's just like dream big, do it, whatever the cost. Whoever's telling you you're wrong, just push on through and you're going to be right in the end. And I think for the vast majority of people, that isn't true, right? So my first piece of advice would be, do not waste 5 years of your life pushing something up a hill that no one wants. Do what Y Combinator recommends and try and launch it now. Try and move very quickly towards validating it with real customers and real investors, right? Because if no one wants to invest in it, it's also going to be a really long, really hard struggle. And if you're really passionate about being an entrepreneur and this product idea isn't working, you're not finding product market fit, just move on. Just do something else. Fall in love with the problem, don't fall in love with the solution, and be willing to adapt to what customers are actually telling you.
Fall in love with the problem, not the solution, I think is a wonderful piece of advice, because you're not then wrapping your whole identity in the solution that you yourself have created, and that becomes you perhaps lose sight of some of the practical realities of, to your point, if it's something the customer doesn't want, you can go to the moon and back trying to push this thing, but it's never gonna catch.
Yeah. I completely agree. And then I think the second thing I'd say is, like, you should choose a co-founder like you would choose a partner for marriage. It is, I think everyone tells you before you start a business that it's going to be really, really tough. And I don't think it really means anything, until you're really doing it. You can't really conceptualize how brutal it's going to be at times. And there are times when it is absolutely dark. And I think the thing that gets you through that is your co-founders. And I think a lot of companies collapse because the co-founding unit can't navigate those challenges together. There's relationship breakdowns, or they start wanting different things. Again, much like a marriage, right? Like if you deviate in terms of the core of why you're there and the way you want to work together, it will fall apart. And so pick people who are going to show up for you emotionally and empathetically, who care about the same things that you care about, who bring different skills to the table, sure, but who most importantly, when everything gets absolutely brutal, you trust to be on your side and to support you.
I think the thing that strikes me is that you talk of Quell with such energy, and it's infectious. There's such energy and passion and excitement about the possibilities. And I wonder if, therefore, there's a sort of, you clearly have this personal, I say clearly, it would appear you have a real personal connection with Quell's mission. And I was wondering if there's perhaps a personal aspect of the journey that for you resonates deeply with Quell's mission to make fitness engaging and accessible.
Yes, I mean, I think the core of the mission to me is incredibly motivating, right? Like the idea that there are gigantic numbers of people out there who either are exercising and hating a giant part of their life, or who are just not exercising and feeling miserable, or at least worse than they could in terms of their physical and mental health, and that this could be something that solves that at scale, right? That really transforms that part of life for a bunch of people is so exciting. And I'm so excited for launch. I'm so excited to see how people respond to this product. And I think the other thing that's just really meaningful for me is, I grew up a gamer. I was a classic kid where my parents wouldn't let me have a Game Boy, wouldn't let me have a Nintendo or anything. I had to go around friends' houses to play it, which just made me want it all the more, probably why I'm in gaming right now. But I think having the privilege of being able to actually design games independently of the fitness, like the worlds and the characters and the mechanics, is just incredible. For someone who hasn't come through that background, who hasn't come up through that ecosystem, to have wound up in a place where they get to make those kinds of decisions and create that kind of product is just, I feel exceptionally lucky. And that definitely gives me a lot of energy. So
what does success mean to you?
In terms of at Quell, or in terms of as a general term?
Your choice.
So I think success ultimately breaks down into two things. I forget the book where I read this, but it really resonated with me. I think it might have been Happiness by Design, but it's pleasure and purpose. Right. Success to me ultimately is happiness. Any other definition is wrong. And happiness is a combination of pleasure and purpose. And so I think, if you apply that to a commercial landscape, I think the pleasure side of it is building a culture that you want to come into work every day and that everyone else does too. I think that's so important for us. We have can I lightly swear on this, or is this kind of
you can say whatever you like. Absolutely fine. Not a problem at all.
So no asshole geniuses is a really big sort of pillar of our hiring. We turned away exceptional people because they violated that rule. But
it's a good rule.
Yeah. You love the people, you love the culture, and the work that you're doing stimulates you and engages you. And then from a purpose side, as opposed to pleasure, it's about achieving this at scale, right? Getting this into people's homes and transforming lives and feeling like all of this work and all of this blood and sweat and graft from this entire team of passionate people has translated into a real impact on the world. And I think if those two things are true, if I love what I do every day and feel the people around me do, and I feel like we're having a transformative impact on people's lives at scale, then that's success.
The thing that strikes me about the founder journey is it's all consuming. We've touched on this. What do you do away from that to relax, unwind, recharge? Do you get the chance? And if so, how do you spend your time?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, my lifestyle's a lot better here than it was at McKinsey, which I think people are surprised by. But I think if you push yourself too hard, there's science out there that I think says that every hour you work past 11 p.m. is like taking a shot. So if you're working late, you're basically working drunk, which, I don't think many people would recommend.
No.
And so I'm a big believer in sort of controlled and sustainable lifestyle, right? You have to pay back crunch eventually somewhere. It's a zero-sum game. So I don't believe in it being something that becomes unsustainable. What is tough about it, even with the slightly better lifestyle, is like the stress per hour is much higher, right? Everything means more. There's a lot more ambiguity. If you're in a job where you have a boss, ultimately often your main KPI is making sure your boss is happy, right? And that's quite a defined problem. Whereas when you become a founder, it's making the market happy, and that's a lot scarier and a lot less knowable. That's challenging. I think, in terms of what I do, exercise when I can is still really important. I know it improves my mental health, but I am someone who kind of hates what they have access to today. So I'll do some running. I'll go to the gym occasionally. I'll do some cycling, a little bit of yoga or Pilates, whenever kind of I'm in the mood for. I'm very, very social. So friends are very important to me. So spending a lot of time with friends, just doing dinners or going for walks and all that kind of stuff, I feel like really resets me. And then gaming still, I haven't managed to make myself hate it yet. So I love playing games when I get home and just kind of unwinding, or sometimes getting more stressed depending on the game, but in a fun way of an evening.
Do you find some inspiration I'd imagine, are there times when gaming you sort of think, actually, there's an element of this, you could apply a fitness principle, a play principle to whatever game it is you might be playing, and so you get some element of inspiration from it, or is that a bit too simplistic?
I try really hard to keep the two things separate. So like when I'm on working time in working mode, I will critically assess the games that I've been playing. But, I don't want to be, the artist who starts hating drawing in their free time, or the writer who starts hating writing, right? Like I think it's very easy to turn your hobby into a job and then to turn that hobby into something that you loathe. So I try and keep them separate. But yes, of course, there's a little bit of me that's always thinking, right, how do I bring this into Quell?
So on that subject of inspiration, who or what inspires you?
God, that's that's a tough one and a very long list. I think maybe the single most inspiring thing I've ever come across for me was the Foundation series of books by Isaac Asimov. I don't know if any of you, if any of your listeners will have read it, or if you've read it indeed. But
no, I haven't. I'm a voracious reader. I love to read. I will be now adding that to my list.
Oh, you absolutely have to. It's astonishing. He wrote this sort of trilogy of books quite early in his career, before he was especially famous, and then he got really successful with all the iRobot stuff. And then, his publisher, I think, reached out to him and said, some publisher in another country wants to kind of release this book that you did ages ago. Is that cool? And he said, I've never made any money from this. They were like, what, you're Isaac Asimov and you never made money from a book? Like, let's reevaluate this. And then they kind of did this big relaunch thing. And that year it won every award for the best sci-fi series of all time. But it's basically this book about what they call psychohistory. So it's almost like macroeconomic theory applied to history, where this amazing guy looks forward and sees that the entire world is about to, or the entire galactic civilization is about to come crumbling down. He like mathematically predicts this as a certainty, like it is going to happen. And he basically applies these concepts to, the universe at scale, the social fabric of the universe at scale. He kind of models out human behavior and works out that if he intervenes in a very light touch way at certain key points, he can shorten the period of like horror and savagery and barbarism from, thousands and thousands of years to a much sort of time span. And so the book just kind of goes through the rebirth of this civilization, like flitting forward in time by 100 years or, a couple of 100 years at a pop. And the people that you were just intimately acquainted with and rooting for are now statues in the town square as the heroes of yesteryear. But just the scale and the scope of this series in terms of, human understanding and time is just mammoth. And he wrote it so young. And I just absolutely, it was one of those books where I read it and was like, I can't believe a human wrote this. I can't believe a human thought big enough to write this. And that's something that really inspired me.
That sounds fascinating. I'm definitely adding that to the list. So I guess finally, what excites you about the future?
What excites me about the future? The Quell answer is I'm incredibly excited about the birth of this as a new sector, as a new way of people exercising, as a new way of spending their time. I'm excited to see this transform people's perceptions of fitness and gaming and change the way that they relate to both. That's very exciting. In terms of the wider future on a societal level, I don't know, it's pretty dark days right now. It can be pretty hard to be super excited about a lot of things in the future. Everything has a sting in the tail. For every incredible advancement that AI is making, there's 1,000 people out of work in a specific company. I think long term, maybe this is a bit of a wanky answer, but the idea that really appeals to me is this kind of post-scarcity world. Right. So the idea that with enough technological innovation, with enough AI, with enough efficiency, with enough sort of investment in processes and technology, you get to a point where you don't have scarcity in basic human needs like food and shelter and medicine. And you kind of move into a situation where work becomes an optional thing, right? Like I love the idea of a society where people work on the things that they love and that they are excited by and at their leisure. That's the utopia. And the people who don't feel inspired by those things don't have to do that. So it's that kind of like Marxist utopian vision. Who knows if it's practical? Who knows if it's something that will ever come to pass or can arise out of the situation we're in right now? But the notion that people one day won't have to work for their necessities is something that I'm very excited about.
Yeah, and you're not the first person with whom I'd shared the similar idea. And I think it's a really interesting concept to start to look at how the changes that technology will afford us and actually to speculate about what the direction of travel and where we may end up, given that it's so arguably alien from where we might find ourselves today. It's difficult to wrap your head around, but you could sort of see with a bit of future gazing, well, what couldn't happen? I think once upon a time we'd have spoken to people that conversations, I'm old enough to know that I used to speak to an uncle in Australia on Christmas Day on the telephone down a line once a year. And it was kind of like, oh, you need to get that call done quick because it's costing a lot of money. I can now speak to anyone anywhere in the world, and that's in my lifetime for free, anywhere in the world. It's an obvious thing to say, but this is just taken for granted now. We can do these things, certainly from a developed world perspective. But no, fascinating. So importantly, where should we be pointing listeners to find out more about Quell? Where can they go? Where should we send them?
Yeah, so you can find us on playquell.com, our website. You can find us on Instagram, also playquell. We have a Discord channel, also playquell. And you can also subscribe to our mailing list via the website where we share a lot of the more exciting stuff that's coming out.
Fantastic. Well, look, it's been wonderful to share time with you this afternoon and hear of your insights and your experience and really to share in the energy that you have and the passion that you have for what Quell can achieve and will achieve, I've no doubt, will continue to achieve. So I really appreciate you taking the time out. It's been great to share on some of those experiences. I wish you continued success, and I'm very much looking forward to playing, participating, seeing how this might affect my own fitness journey. So really appreciate it. It's been great to speak with you, and good luck for all you've going on.
Thanks very much, Lee. It's been an absolute pleasure to be on here.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.